Hi, I'm Lucy Steigerwald for Liberty.me, and today I'm talking to Jim Epstein, a producer for Reason TV, and sometimes a blogger and contributor to the print mag as well. And he's also contributed to the Daily Beast a couple of times, and he used to work at PBS back in the day. And even farther back in the day, he interned or something for Alan Lomax, and I'm very jealous about that. Epstein generally covers a lot of city, kind of urban issues for Reason TV. He's also done pieces about the stimulus, healthcare, and a bunch of other libertarian style things.
Thanks for having me, Lucy.
Thanks for coming, Epstein. Can you just you yesterday you released 4 different videos and a big article on the sharing economy, which was a term I wasn't super familiar with, but some of the stuff you covered I was familiar with. Can you first kind of tell us what the sharing economy is and what kind of what you focused on in the videos, like specifically, because an overview, I guess.
Sure. The share, basically I set out to write the piece because I myself couldn't answer the question what the sharing economy was, although I've seen this phrase get bandied about in many places. There's actually, as we speak, a big conference, sharing economy conference going on in San Francisco. There's a magazine all about the sharing economy. There's this huge political action group called Peers, which is all about defending the sharing economy. And I was pretty confused about what the sharing economy was. All I knew was that a lot of things that I like were being grouped under the heading sharing economy, like in particularly, Airbnb, the kind of peer-to-peer accommodations marketplace, and ride-sharing companies like Lyft and Uber and Sidecar, and then another company I focused on called Eat With, which lets regular people book restaurant meals in their own homes, which I thought was a pretty cool idea because there's so many great chefs out there, and yet there's no tougher business than the restaurant business. So why shouldn't they be able to earn a little bit of extra money by cooking in their own kitchens and having people pay to come over? And then what was also interesting is that a lot of these business models are clashing with government in various ways. They're, in some cases, coming up with new ways of doing things. They get around existing government regulations. In the case of these taxi companies, which are, in a lot of cities, you actually need a medallion or a permit to run a cab. These were technically car services, but they were so easy for people to call using their cell phones that in cities all over the world, people are choosing to go this route. And existing regulations on the books don't require these car service companies to have the regular inspections and the permitted cars and the permitted drivers. So it was sort of this technological way around a lot of existing regulations. Then with Airbnb, which I'd covered in the past, you see people who are turning their apartments into little hotels, and yet the housing code may not allow for such things. So it's creating these huge public policy battles. And these defenders of the so-called sharing economy are really doing great work. They're kind of out in front, making the case as to why these services are great and why they should be allowed and why we have to roll back bad regulations and not over-regulate these companies. And yet they don't talk like libertarians at all. They talk about how this is a new economy that's different from the old economy. It's a new paradigm for capitalism. It's finally about the little guy. The goal is to promote the environment, to save the environment. We're reducing our resource consumption. All of these things that don't quite make sense to me, and yet they're advocating policies that I believe in. So that's kind of what I set out to do. So I wrote a piece based upon lots of interviews I did with people who are involved with the sharing economy to sort of get at how they're using the phrase, what it means. And then I did this series of videos, one about Eat With, the one I mentioned, one about this ride sharing, which is these sort of alternative taxis, and I focused on this very sweet woman who's 27 and she's getting a master's in social work around DC, and she just picks up extra cash by logging into Lyft whenever she wants and giving people rides around town and making money. And it's like, it's so great. And this is how the cab business should be. And yet the traditional taxi business in DC is just so, you need to, they kind of get bullied by these hack inspectors who do routine inspections. They need permits for their cars, which you can't get anymore. They need permits themselves. Like, it just, the existence of Lyft and Sidecar and Uber and what they're doing in the cab business just shows that those regulations serve absolutely no purpose except to protect existing players. They're so anti-consumer and ridiculous. Another, for example, the Institute for Justice, which I know you're also a big fan of, the big libertarian law firm, they've fought this 2.5-year battle in Milwaukee to increase the number of permitted cabs on the street from something like 321. Half of them were 321 cabs that are permitted to run on the streets. Half of them are owned by two brothers. They're worth about $350,000 each, and nobody can break in and nobody can find a cab. So the Institute for Justice for 2.5 years has been fighting this. It was declared, unconstitutional. They ended up settling on, they increased, the Milwaukee passed legislation that increased the number of cabs by 100, so it went up to 421. The Institute for Justice declared partial victory, and they kind of turned their attention elsewhere. The following week, Uber came to town, and the month after that, Lyft came to town, and now the place is crawling with cabs. Anyone can get into the business, and everyone downtown when the bars are closing can get a cab. So it's just a great example of how technology solves a lot of our problems when political will, isn't going to cut it. So anyway, and then the final pieces I did were, one was on this really cool curriculum sharing website called Teachers Pay Teachers, and the final one was about the promise of what's called equity crowdfunding, which is like Kickstarter with stock. So like your corner bistro wants to raise money. Well, instead of giving you a free meal, or instead of sending you a product or a T-shirt, these companies can actually give you a little stake in the business. And sort of I looked at what the potential was for that to really change things in investment and venture capital markets.
That's a lot to kind of get a handle on, though I was enjoying your videos last night. The videos themselves made me kind of like the general Jeffrey Tucker-esque technology will save us from government type thing. But then your piece got a little more complicated, your print piece, and more interesting with the fact that, the weird contradiction of the fact that a lot of liberals or leftists, they're all gung-ho about this sharing economy.
So we should be against it then.
If we were that contrary, and I feel like libertarians are almost that contrary, but not quite. Mm-hmm. Actually, some of the reason commenters were kind of leaning that way, like, hell with those guys. I guess actually, before this, you mentioned Institute for Justice and like the occupational licensing horror stories. Monks can't make coffins or whatever the hell it was. Hair braiding, you need X number of hours. I always thought for a couple of years that it's not that liberals like actively said, yes, I think the poor minority who wants to braid hair should be, not allowed to unless she, like, they don't actively support it. They simply ignored the fact that these absurd regulations existed. And it always seemed to me like there should be a common ground here. Like, I remember your DC taxi piece from a couple years ago, the one that got you arrested. And I remember a nauseating liberal blog, making fun of Nick Gillespie, but not addressing the really important point that this taxi law is going to hurt minorities and immigrants, the people that liberals ostensibly, want to help. So I guess that's like a very long way of getting around to the question, why maybe is that changing now? Why are liberals and the left more interested in this fixing this kind of regulation, I guess?
Well, I'm not sure, but some ideas are, I think, you don't have to be a libertarian to get really excited about technology and how it changes things. So you have, that these, like for example, Airbnb's website is just, it works so well in terms of also weeding out. People just have uniformly good experiences on Airbnb. That's wrong to say. People have bad experiences, but they have probably better experiences than they have in, the crappy motel you pull over to at the side of the highway. I mean, it's the kind of the feedback mechanisms where people rate each other, the reputational aspects that these online marketplaces are able to incorporate. I mean, this is a tremendous advance in technology, and people get, you don't have to be a libertarian to get excited about that and to want it to flourish. And it's so sensible. It becomes very hard to, make a case that someone like Chelsea Spade, who I profiled, this 27-year-old, totally sweet grad student, that she should be stopped. We need to. She's somehow like a public menace because of what she's doing. There is this social aspect built into these services where, with Lyft, you come in, you sit in the front seat, not the back seat. You greet your driver with a fist bump, and then a lot of drivers like Chelsea encourage people to kind of vent about their day. So it brings this really nice social aspect to it. And that's true of a lot of these sharing economy sites. Carpooling.com in Europe, I think they count the number of people that have gotten married, by taking rides with each other, which I actually got married to my wife because she gave me a ride somewhere, so that's close to me. Nice. So that social thing, that wins a lot of people over, and it's important, and a lot of these, I don't mean to downplay it at all. And then I think that so basically what you're asking me is why. Well, they're also making a case that somehow this is sort of a new paradigm. This is a new thing. This is not like this is a break with the old way of doing capitalism. Yeah. And then they also make arguments. A lot of the arguments are framed in terms of the environmental benefits of car sharing, which, in my piece I'm kind of skeptical of. Like, that could be great that a company reduces the number of cars on the street because everyone is sharing a vehicle with each other. But, that may just invite more cars to come onto the street. There's nothing that necessarily says that using resources more efficiently will lead to an overall reduction in resource use. And that's the fallacy that a lot of these groups are kind of falling into. So.
I guess going off of that a little bit, I'm not, I'm not about to say, oh, liberals like it, so we can't support it. But do you see any danger in the fact that liberal supporters are framing it in sort of more left terms? I can't remember, in your piece you mentioned someone who thought that Uber and Lyft should basically be able to get their money back in gas and such and expenses, but not actually profit. I mean, there's a couple of absurd things that it makes a libertarian wonder if there's a point where they're not going to be on our team anymore, I guess.
Yeah, well, you're referring to this woman, Janelle Orsi, who with the Sustainable Economies Law Center. Of all the people I spoke to, she's pretty far to the left, and her view is that sharing economy sites are great, except, ride sharing, these services like Lyft and Uber and Sidecar are wonderful. It's just we should limit their profits so that they're just making ends meet. So they're just covering their gas and their tolls, or probably half of their gas and tolls, rather than.
Lord.
But I don't know. I don't see much of a threat in that. First of all, her organization is doing a lot of really good work. Mm-hmm. They were behind a law. They had a role in passing a law in California allowing sort of home food production. They're behind a movement to rewrite California's code to make sure that it's clear that alternative currencies like Bitcoin are legal in the state. So they're doing good work, and I just think that her ideas are so just palpably absurd that I don't think they pose much of a threat.
I hope so.
And this group Peers too, which is kind of the big, they are bringing this sort of organizational expertise, which I think a lot of people in the libertarian movement lack, to bring getting people to rally behind these services. And that was the other point that I was going to make, which is, why are liberals behind this? Why are there so many fans of Airbnb? Well, one nice thing about the sharing economy, something like Airbnb, is you've got a lot of Airbnb hosts, right, who see how great it is. They want to make the money, so you have sort of this constituency right there. So a lot of the people that turn out at these rallies, like in Silver Lake, California, there was this big neighborhood council meeting where people were, there was a big constituency of people who were speaking out about how we got to keep these services legal. The same thing happened in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And that's because you have this vested constituency. So it sort of speaks to this public choice problem that we often have while in pushing libertarian ideas, while, with the old taxi business, to get people rallying around, killing a medallion system or making the taxi business more free. Yeah, it benefits taxi drivers. It benefits passengers to kind of make it so that we actually have enough cabs. But it's still hard to, get people out in support of these issues in the way that it is if there are hundreds of people in a small town who are actually making pretty good money, renting out their spare bedrooms via Airbnb.
Sorry, I'm a little, as usual, you've covered a lot of things in just when I asked a couple of questions. Let me see. Okay. Oh yeah, okay, easy one. What was the most what was the weirdest thing or most surprising thing that you, like, what was the most interesting aspect of the sharing economy to you? Which is really broad, I know.
Well, of all the pieces I went out and shot, I'm probably most excited about equity crowdfunding. I love this idea. I interviewed Dania Ringelman, who's the co-founder of Indiegogo, which is one of the big crowdfunding sites that exist, and they want to move very aggressively into equity crowdfunding. And she really convinced me in the course of the interview that there's just such potential. It's sort of this very Hayekian idea that we all have knowledge. We all have a lot of knowledge about specific industries, and we see good opportunities all the time. But because the securities law is built in a way that you can't just invest $100 in a really cool idea that you happen to know because of your hobby or your professional expertise that this might have legs. You can't put a little small stake in that. And the fact that this equity crowdfunding sort of has the potential for that. So you'll see it just could lead to much more efficient allocation of investment capital and good ideas really getting the funding they need to take off. And I think that has just tremendous potential in terms of, investment, finance, and innovation. Probably the piece I enjoyed the most was this piece I did on Eat With, where I went to a dinner at a couple. The woman is Japanese and she's a great chef, and her boyfriend is a really great host. He also makes really delicious homemade kombucha, by the way, and we drank that. And it was just, I really experienced the idea that, like, which is the ethos of Eat With, which is that I paid for my seat. I sat at the table with these perfect strangers and we shared a meal, and like instantly we felt like old friends. And it was really great to be in an intimate setting like that with people who are not part of my usual social group, who I don't have any other social connection to. It was just a lot of fun, and I really I want to do it again, and it made me feel great. And I really see the sort of, I hope that site continues to grow and expand, because I think it's just a great model.
Expand in spite of that ridiculous CBS story that was dripping with terrifying italics.
When I did that, when you do a story, you need to, so there's this great site Eat With, but of course, in the course of storytelling, there's always got to be some, conflict and resolution. And the thing is, with sites like Eat With, I didn't have really a conflict yet because there's been no crackdown. There's just been threats. There have been statements to the media from health department officials: "This is illegal. This can't go on. We got to stop." But I think that they're too afraid to actually burst in and arrest Matt, levy big fines on Matt and I, because again, and this plays to something else that we were talking about before about the sharing economy. It looks so bad. It's from a publicity standpoint, like it's so obvious to any observer that these people are contributing value. They're not a public menace. It's in the same way that telling 27-year-old Chelsea Spade that she can't make her spending money and help pay her tuition by giving rides to people around DC and hearing their problems. Again, that's another example where to tell her that she has to stop is nothing but a great gift to libertarian storytellers like me who can highlight just the incredible injustice of such a thing. So I think the